There is a phenomenon called internal churning that causes an epiphany to happen. When this man was thrown in the platform and somehow lying down in the platform, the indignity that he went through created an enormous amount of rearrangement in his thought process. Till now, the way he looked at life through certain patterns of mind, somehow this entire mind went through enormous rearrangement in this thought process. It caused an enormous amount of emotional churning within him. Something deep within him was feeling like a mixie. It was churning completely. Now, whenever you go through this enormous internal churning, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, when an enormous amount of internal churning happens, a spiritual phenomena happens called epiphany, where there is a divine intervention. And what this intervention does is, it shifts the focus with which you look at life. It's called an ever since moment. Ever since moment is, you can define the life of the barrister from the time he was born to that day in the platform, and ever since. Somehow that incident, that moment becomes a point of reference in your life, and everything about your life from then onwards is defined by that reference point, and that reference point is called ever since moment in your life. So somehow when this man was dying, and none of the hospital authorities were willing to help this man, and during those moments, the school teacher asked this question: there are enough institutions to provide dignity to those who are living. Why there is no institution to provide dignity to those who are dying? Why can't I do something about it? She went through the same churning. There was an enormous amount of mental rearrangement that happens. She till then looked at life through certain pattern of thoughts, and right now she was going through this enormous amount of churning, which was changing the patterns with which she was looking at things. And this enormous amount of churning that was happening within her created a lot of emotional churning within her, brought in a moment of divine intervention, epiphany. And that became an ever since moment in her life. And that ever since moment in her life, that is a point of reference. So the life of Agnes from the time she was born to that moment, ever since. And somehow anybody who has ever experienced, in a small proportion, all of us would have experienced. All of us would have gone through. In fact, what you refer to turning points in your life are basically your ever since moments. We went through little churning, and little churning created an ever since moment, and that little churning produced little results in life. If you can go through churning to the point that you invite that divine intervention into your life, then an ever since moment happens in your life, which is no more just an ever since moment in your life. It becomes an ever since moment in the history of the world itself. And that is how an ordinary person became a world-class orator. That is how a petrol pump vendor builds a 60,000 crore Reliance empire. That is how a programmer, whom his friends said, after 10 years of building Infosys and still operating in the confines of a small apartment, and the 5 of the people who started with and the 4 of his friends asked him, people who studied with us have become more economically successful than we are. I think we should wind this business. This is not for us, let's go. And one man in the 5 went through the amount of emotional churning he went through that day. And today it's a world-class Infosys. Everything changed after that one meeting, when he found that 5 people came together to start a business, of which 4 have lost hope. They said, let's sell the business. He said, no, we will not sell the business. Give me 1 year, I'll buy the 4 of you. And that was the beginning of Infosys. And from there, everything, an ever since moment.